You sit by the phone, waiting for a call that never comes. The visits are less frequent, the conversations shorter, and the warmth you once felt from your family seems to be fading. You start wondering, did something change? Did I do something wrong? The truth is, relationships don't fall apart overnight. It happens gradually, through small moments, unintentional habits, and unnoticed mistakes. The worst part? Most people don't even realize they're pushing their loved ones away until the distance is already there. You might think, my family knows I love them. Why would they drift away? But love alone isn't always enough to keep connections strong. The way you communicate, the way you show interest in their lives, and even the energy you bring to conversations all play a role in keeping your family close. If you've ever felt like your children or grandchildren are ignoring you, avoiding your calls, or not prioritizing time with you, it's time to take an honest look at what might be causing that distance. In this video, we're going to uncover 7 hidden reasons why your family might be pulling away, and, more importantly, how you can rebuild those relationships before it's too late. If you want to strengthen your bond with your loved ones, hit like and subscribe, because the way you nurture your relationships today will shape how strong they are tomorrow. You love your family. You want the best for them. You've lived through experiences, learned hard lessons, and you don't want them to make the same mistakes you did. So you offer advice, sometimes without being asked. You check in frequently, ask detailed questions, and try to guide them toward what you believe are the best choices. But what if, instead of feeling supported, they feel controlled? One of the most common reasons family members pull away is a lack of respect for personal independence. You might not see it that way. After all, what's wrong with giving advice, asking questions, or wanting to stay involved? But to your children or grandchildren, these actions can feel invasive, overwhelming, or even suffocating. Boundaries are the invisible lines that separate one person's independence from another's influence. When these lines are crossed too often, relationships suffer. It's not about shutting people out. It's about recognizing where love and care end and where personal autonomy begins. One of the biggest mistakes people make is offering unsolicited advice too often. You might think you're just being helpful, but constantly suggesting how someone should live their life, whether it's about parenting, career choices, or even how they spend their free time, can feel like a lack of trust. Instead of feeling supported, your family members may feel as if their decisions are never good enough, as if they always need to justify themselves, or as if they can't have a conversation without it turning into a lecture. Another common issue: asking too many personal questions. It might come from a place of love, but pressing too much about relationships, finances, or private matters can make people feel like their independence isn't respected. When they hesitate to answer or give vague responses, it's often not because they have something to hide. It's because they're trying to protect their sense of personal space. And then there's the struggle with letting go. If you've been heavily involved in your children's or grandchildren's lives for years, it can be difficult to accept when they need space to make their own choices. But the reality is, as people grow, they need to establish their own ways of living, even if those choices are different from yours. So how do you show love and support without crossing boundaries? The key is to shift from control to empowerment. Instead of offering unsolicited advice, wait until they ask. Instead of pressing for details, let them share what they're comfortable with. And most importantly, acknowledge that their choices, even if they're not the ones you would make, are still valid. A great way to start respecting boundaries is by asking, "Would you like my advice on this, or would you rather I just listen?" This small shift shows that you respect their independence and gives them control over the conversation. It allows them to seek guidance when they need it, without feeling like they're being told what to do. At the end of the day, the relationships that last are the ones built on mutual respect. Your family isn't pulling away because they don't love you. They're pulling away because they need space to be their own people. The best thing you can do? Support them in a way that makes them feel valued, not controlled. If this resonated with you, take a second to like and subscribe, because sometimes the best way to keep your family close is by giving them the space they need. The phone rings. Your child or grandchild sees your name on the screen. Before they even answer, they already know what's coming. Another request, another favor, another need. Maybe it's something small, like help with the internet or a ride to an appointment. Maybe it's something bigger, like financial assistance or an urgent errand. But when was the last time you called just to talk, just to ask how they were, with no requests attached? Relationships weaken when they start feeling transactional. When the only time you reach out is when you need something, your family might start to feel like they're not valued for who they are, but for what they can do. And over time, this can lead to resentment, avoidance, and emotional distance. It's not that they don't want to help. It's that they want to feel like their relationship with you is based on more than just obligations. No one wants to feel like they're only being contacted when they're needed, rather than because they're loved. At first, they might not even notice. But over time, if every conversation revolves around a favor, they'll start hesitating before picking up your calls. They'll anticipate feeling pressured, and even if they continue to help, they may do it with a growing sense of frustration rather than warmth. So how do you change this? The key is to start reaching out with no agenda. Just to talk, just to listen, just to connect. Instead of calling only when there's something you need, try calling to ask, "How has your week been?" Or "What's something exciting happening in your life?" Make an effort to check in without expecting anything in return. If you haven't done this in a while, it might feel awkward at first. But over time, it will rebuild the emotional foundation of your relationships. When your family sees that you genuinely care about them, not just about what they can do for you, they will naturally start reaching out more often, not out of obligation, but out of real connection. And when you do need help, frame the request in a way that shows appreciation rather than expectation. Instead of saying, "I need you to help me with something," try, "Would you be able to help me with this? I'd really appreciate it." Small changes in wording can make a huge difference in how your request is received. The goal is to make sure that your family doesn't associate your calls with stress, but rather with warmth and enjoyment. They should look forward to talking to you, not feel like they have to prepare for another favor. So ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you reached out to a family member just to check in with no request attached? If it's been too long, today is the perfect time to change that. Drop a comment below. What's one small way you can strengthen your family connections this week? You pick up the phone, excited to talk to a family member, but as the conversation goes on, you find yourself venting about your health, about how expensive everything is, about how people don't have the same values they used to. By the end of the call, you feel relieved, like you got things off your chest. But on the other end of the line, your loved one feels different, drained, heavy, maybe even a little reluctant to call again soon. No one enjoys being around constant negativity. It's exhausting. Conversations that are always centered on complaints, frustrations, or disappointments create an emotional weight that can make people start avoiding interactions altogether. Over time, even the people who love you most may start calling less, visiting less, and keeping conversations shorter. Not because they don't care, but because the relationship feels more like a burden than a joy. This doesn't mean you have to fake happiness or pretend everything is perfect. But if every conversation is dominated by complaints about aches and pains, the state of the world, or the way young people do things wrong, it creates an energy that pushes people away instead of drawing them closer. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that venting is the same as connecting. But connection comes from shared experiences, mutual support, and uplifting conversations, not just from unloading frustrations. If your family walks away from conversations feeling worse instead of better, they will slowly but surely start to limit their time with you. So how do you change this? Start by being aware of how often you focus on the negative. Do you begin conversations by talking about problems? Do you often complain without offering solutions? Do you rarely bring up things that make you happy or excited? If so, try shifting the balance. Instead of starting a call by saying, "I barely slept last night, my back is killing me," try, "It's been a rough night, but I'm looking forward to watching my favorite show later." Small adjustments like this change the tone of the conversation and make it more inviting. Another simple but powerful change: expressing gratitude. Instead of talking about what's wrong, start mentioning things you appreciate. Tell your loved ones what you're grateful for. Even if it's something small, like the taste of your morning coffee, a sunny day, or a funny story you heard. Positivity is contagious, and when people associate you with warmth and appreciation, they will want to talk to you more often. And when you do need to share something difficult, balance it with something light. Life isn't always easy, and you don't have to pretend that it is. But adding even a little bit of humor, optimism, or curiosity can keep conversations from becoming emotionally draining. At the end of the day, people remember how you make them feel. If every interaction with you feels heavy and stressful, they will subconsciously start avoiding them. But if your presence brings joy, laughter, and support, they will naturally seek out more time with you. So ask yourself honestly, are your conversations lifting your family up or weighing them down? If this made you think, take a second to like and subscribe, because small changes in how we communicate can make all the difference in keeping our loved ones close. The phone rings. Your child or grandchild finally answers. Instead of feeling joy, you say, "Oh, so you finally remembered me?" Or maybe you send a message that reads, "I guess you're too busy for me these days." You don't mean to be hurtful. You just want them to know that you miss them. But what if I told you that these guilt-inducing comments are actually pushing them further away? No one likes feeling emotionally manipulated. Even if the guilt trip is subtle, it creates a sense of obligation rather than genuine connection. Instead of making loved ones want to call more often, it makes them dread conversations because they anticipate feeling bad about not being there enough. Over time, this cycle leads to shorter calls, fewer visits, and an emotional distance that is hard to bridge. At its core, guilt tripping is an attempt to control someone else's behavior, to make them feel bad enough that they'll do what you want. But while guilt may work in the short term, it doesn't build strong, healthy relationships. Instead of reaching out because they genuinely want to, your family may start calling only out of obligation, which means those interactions will feel less meaningful and more forced. So why do people guilt trip? Often, it comes from a place of loneliness, longing, or feeling unimportant. You might truly feel neglected, and guilt becomes a way to express that hurt. But the problem is that instead of deepening your bond, it creates resentment. Your loved ones don't leave those conversations feeling connected. They leave feeling weighed down, guilty, and, ironically, less likely to reach out again. If you've ever said things like, "I guess I don't matter anymore. I suppose I'll just sit here alone as usual." If you really cared, you'd visit more often. Then you may be unknowingly pushing your family away. Even though you're trying to express your feelings, these comments make conversations feel like emotional minefields. No one wants to engage in a relationship where they always feel like they're failing. So how do you change this dynamic? The key is shifting from guilt to gratitude. Instead of making your loved ones feel bad for not being around, make them feel good when they are. If your grandchild finally calls, don't start with, "Oh, I thought you forgot about me." Instead say, "I'm so happy to hear from you. Tell me what's new in your life." When you create a positive, uplifting atmosphere, your family will naturally want to be around you more. They'll associate conversations with warmth, not pressure. And instead of calling just to avoid feeling guilty, they'll call because they genuinely want to. Another important step: finding fulfillment outside of family interactions. If your entire sense of happiness depends on how often your children or grandchildren call, you'll naturally put pressure on them to fill that emotional void. But when you cultivate your own interests, friendships, routines, you take that pressure off them, allowing relationships to flourish naturally rather than out of guilt. At the end of the day, people are drawn to those who make them feel appreciated, not those who make them feel inadequate. If you replace guilt with gratitude, criticism with kindness, and pressure with understanding, you'll notice that your family starts reaching out more. Not because they feel obligated, but because they truly want to. So, let me ask you, have you ever felt guilted into a conversation? Or have you ever accidentally guilt-tripped a loved one? Drop a comment below, and let's talk about how we can build relationships based on love, not obligation. You sit across from your child or grandchild trying to have a conversation, but something feels off. They give short answers, don't open up much, and seem distant. You ask how they're doing, and they respond with a simple, "I'm fine." The connection feels weaker than it used to. You wonder, why don't they share things with me anymore? One of the biggest reasons family members stop sharing is because they feel like you're not truly interested in their lives. Not because you don't love them, but because you might not be engaging with their world in a way that makes them feel understood and valued. It's easy to assume that just asking, "How are you?" is enough. But real interest goes beyond small talk. It's about being genuinely curious about what excites them, what they struggle with, what they care about. If your conversations always revolve around your experiences, your past, or your advice, it may unintentionally leave them feeling unheard. Imagine this. Your grandchild is excited about a new hobby, maybe a video game, a sport, or an artist they love. They start talking about it, but you quickly dismiss it as silly, unimportant, or something you just don't get. What happens next? They stop sharing. They learn that some topics aren't worth bringing up around you, so they turn to others who will engage with their interests. And the more this happens, the more they start drifting away, not out of anger, but simply because people are naturally drawn to those who make them feel seen and understood. So how do you change this? It starts with active listening. Instead of just hearing their words, engage. Ask follow-up questions. Show them that their world matters to you. If they mention something they're passionate about, dig deeper. Instead of saying, "Oh, I don't know anything about that," try, "That sounds interesting. How did you get into it?" Or tell me more about why you like it. Small efforts make a big difference. If they love a certain kind of music, listen to a song they recommend. If they're obsessed with a TV show, ask what it's about. If they have a hobby, learn a little about it. Even if it's just so you can have better conversations. You don't have to love what they love. You just have to show that it matters to you because it matters to them. But it's not just about hobbies. It's about everyday life. Do you know what's happening in their world? What challenges they're facing? What they're excited about? What they're working toward? If you don't, it might be because you haven't created a space where they feel comfortable sharing. A simple but powerful way to start reconnecting? Instead of always being the one talking, ask open-ended questions. Instead of "How was your day?" try "What was the best part of your week?" Instead of "How's work?" try "What's something exciting happening at work lately?" People open up when they feel like their words are truly valued. When you take a genuine interest in your family's lives, not just in what you want to hear, but in what they want to share, you create deeper, more meaningful connections. And if you're realizing that maybe you haven't been as engaged as you should be, it's never too late to change. A small shift in how you listen, how you ask questions, and how you show up for your loved ones can make all the difference. So let me ask you, when was the last time you truly listened to your family, not just to respond, but to understand? If this made you think, take a second to like and subscribe. Because the key to keeping family close is making them feel like they matter. You sit across from your child or grandchild trying to have a conversation, but something feels off. They give short answers, don't open up much, and seem distant. You ask how they're doing, and they respond with a simple, "I'm fine." The connection feels weaker than it used to. You wonder, why don't they share things with me anymore? One of the biggest reasons family members stop sharing is because they feel like you're not truly interested in their lives. Not because you don't love them, but because you might not be engaging with their world in a way that makes them feel understood and valued. It's easy to assume that just asking, "How are you?" is enough. But real interest goes beyond small talk. It's about being genuinely curious about what excites them, what they struggle with, what they care about. If your conversations always revolve around your experiences, your past, or your advice, it may unintentionally leave them feeling unheard. Imagine this. Your grandchild is excited about a new hobby, maybe a video game, a sport, or an artist they love. They start talking about it, but you quickly dismiss it as silly, unimportant, or something you just don't get. What happens next? They stop sharing. They learn that some topics aren't worth bringing up around you, so they turn to others who will engage with their interests. And the more this happens, the more they start drifting away. Not out of anger, but simply because people are naturally drawn to those who make them feel seen and understood. So how do you change this? It starts with active listening. Instead of just hearing their words, engage. Ask follow-up questions. Show them that their world matters to you. If they mention something they're passionate about, dig deeper. Instead of saying, "Oh, I don't know anything about that," try, "That sounds interesting. How did you get into it?" Or "Tell me more about why you like it." Small efforts make a big difference. If they love a certain kind of music, listen to a song they recommend. If they're obsessed with a TV show, ask what it's about. If they have a hobby, learn a little about it, even if it's just so you can have better conversations. You don't have to love what they love, you just have to show that it matters to you because it matters to them. But it's not just about hobbies, it's about everyday life. Do you know what's happening in their world? What challenges they're facing? What they're excited about? What they're working toward? If you don't, it might be because you haven't created a space where they feel comfortable sharing. A simple but powerful way to start reconnecting, instead of always being the one talking, ask open-ended questions. Instead of "How was your day?" try "What was the best part of your week?" Instead of "How's work?" try "What's something exciting happening at work lately?" People open up when they feel like their words are truly valued. When you take a genuine interest in your family's lives, not just in what you want to hear, but in what they want to share, you create deeper, more meaningful connections. And if you're realizing that maybe you haven't been as engaged as you should be, it's never too late to change. A small shift in how you listen, how you ask questions, and how you show up for your loved ones can make all the difference. So, let me ask you, when was the last time you truly listened to your family, not just to respond, but to understand? If this made you think, take a second to like and subscribe, because the key to keeping family close is making them feel like they matter. You sit with your family, listening to them talk about new trends, social media, or technology you don't understand. Maybe you shake your head and say, "Things were better in my day," or you dismiss their interests as silly, unnecessary, or a waste of time. You don't mean to push them away, you just feel disconnected from the world they live in now. But without realizing it, this resistance to change is creating a growing gap between you and your loved ones. Every generation grows up in a different world. The things that shaped you, the values, struggles, and daily routines, are not the same as what younger generations experience today. That doesn't mean your experiences don't matter. But when you reject the way the world has evolved, you risk making your family feel like you don't respect their lives, their choices, or the things that are important to them. Technology is a major example. For younger generations, smartphones, social media, and instant communication aren't distractions. They're how they stay connected. When you dismiss these things as meaningless or refuse to learn even the basics, you create a barrier that makes it harder for them to relate to you. Imagine if, when you were younger, your parents had refused to acknowledge the music you loved, the way you socialized, or the things that mattered to you. That's exactly how younger family members feel when you resist adapting to their world. But it's not just about technology, it's about a mindset. If every conversation becomes a comparison between how things used to be and how bad things are now, your family may start avoiding deeper discussions because they don't want to be reminded that you disapprove of the world they live in. Instead of bringing you closer, these conversations become walls that make younger generations feel unheard and unappreciated. And the truth is, change isn't just happening around you, it's happening to you too. Your relationships, your role in the family, your daily routines, they all evolve over time. The people who maintain strong, meaningful connections are the ones who adapt, who stay open, who embrace new experiences instead of resisting them. So how do you bridge the gap? Start by being curious. Ask your grandchildren about their favorite apps instead of rolling your eyes at them. If your children talk about new ideas or social changes, listen with an open mind instead of immediately shutting them down. If you've never used video calling, text messaging, or social platforms. Let them teach you. Not because you need to become an expert, but because learning, even just a little, shows that you value their world and want to be part of it. And when you talk about the past, use it as a way to connect, not to divide. Instead of saying, back in my day, people actually talked to each other, try, I love that we have so many ways to stay connected now. What's your favorite way to keep in touch? A simple shift in language can turn a conversation from a lecture into an opportunity for bonding. At the end of the day, resisting change doesn't stop the world from moving forward. It only leaves you behind. The strongest relationships are built by those who grow together, who find ways to embrace the new while cherishing the old. The choice isn't between the past and the present. It's between staying connected or slowly watching the distance grow.